right, how we doing today, Life Point? Well, I've got some energy in the room. Like Dan said, I'm the multiplication pastor, so I'm going to take just a point of privilege here. I'm up here, so I'm in a little bit of control here, so I'm going to share a little bit about what's going on in my world and what I get to do. Basically here, I get to focus on, like, how do we make a difference in our city? How do we collaborate? How do we kind of push the agenda globally and make a difference around the world and do some key partnerships and then planting churches and all that kind of stuff. And a couple of key things that are happening right now that are really cool. And a lot of times we don't get to talk about some of this stuff because there's just so much cool stuff going on. But right now we're preparing and working to go to Honduras this summer, 4 trips. If you're still interested, write Honduras on the card, drop it off in the box on the way out. We'd love to talk to you about the work that we're doing there and how you might get involved. We just had some of our staff and some folks come back just last night, and some awesome stuff's going on down there. But today, a lot of you guys, some of the things that happen sometimes, that if you're new, you probably don't know about a couple of really cool things that we do. So Springfield Elementary, years ago, we started this partnership with them that took a long time to kind of flourish, and it's kind of finally reached a point where we get to do this really cool thing called a mentorship program there that we started years ago. And so COVID shut it down. We rebirthed it. And this year, currently, right now, we have between 25 and 30 mentors who meet with and on a weekly to bi-weekly basis, kids that are considered high risk. So folks in this church who have made a commitment to go over there repeatedly and spend time with these kids and connect with them. And I think that's pretty awesome, right? That's good stuff. But, you know, we had this stupid thing. We always like, well, how can we make a difference on a bigger level? So this wasn't just me. I mean, I do have that, but Arissa is the person who's over this program, and she started talking to folks at Dobie's Bridge. And so we just started 2 weeks ago. Our first mentors are now at Dobie's Bridge, and we have about 3 or 4 that are going to be over there. So that's pretty cool. Second school that we're partnering with. But that's not all. Our vision is, and we're going to be meeting with some of the pastors that we collaborate with in our city and trying to get some of those guys to step it up, because our vision is this: every school needs a mentorship program. The church should take responsibility, start stepping into these places and being light in this darkness. And I'm super proud of Life Point for taking the lead on this, and can't wait to see what God's going to do with that. So thank you guys for what you're doing there. If you want more information about being a part of the mentorship program, just fill it out on the card, put mentorship, school mentorship, whatever, put it in the boxes, and Arissa will reach out to you. So I'm excited to jump in today. I know, a lot of times people don't know this about me, but I am way older than I look. I am not in my 30s. I'm a little bit older than that. And because I'm a little older, things were different for me when I was younger. And those of you that are a little older know this. Like, we didn't have the internet when I was a kid. Listen, I'm pretty ancient. Back when I was a kid, I'm not making this stuff up. I mean, there were like 4 channels on the TV. And they were knobs that you had to turn to get to the channels. There was no remote. And there was a second knob, which was the UHF channels, whatever, the lower ones that goes up into like the bigger numbers. And that's where PBS was. And so you never really went there. That was a terrible channel. And the other 3 were awful too. I mean, that's what we did. When I was younger, you'd go outside. That's what you did. Today you play Bloxburg or Minecraft or whatever. It's weird. When we were a kid, we actually went and got wood. And we actually built things, real things. We would go outside and play war. The neighborhood kids would get together, and we used BB guns, and we would shoot each other. I'm not making this up. The only rule was you don't get your eyes shot out, and that was legit. Today, you play war as well. Our young people play war. They play it on a computer, and they worry about getting carpal tunnel is what their biggest struggle in life is. Got to avoid that. So when I was a kid, one of the things that we did, legitimately, we'd go out in the woods, and I'm like 5, 6 years old. Like, I wouldn't even let my kids, I won't let my 16-year-old right now go outside and play by herself. Some weirdo's going to come by and kidnap her or something. But back then, parents were like, going outside. We kind of hope somebody would kidnap one of y'all. That's a lot of kids in this house. And so we would go out in the woods, we'd play, and we would build tree houses. No kidding. This is, real tree houses. Now, I didn't. My brothers and them did, because I was just not capable. So my brother and my cousin Patrick, they built this one tree house. You build the little stairs to get up to it, and they put these little 3 planks down. So it's not really a tree house. It's more like a platform in a tree. But they had this idea that what we're going to do is we're going to build a bridge over to a tree next to us. And on that one is where we're going to have our little secret clubhouse, and only the people brave enough to cross the bridge get to go into that one. It's going to have walls and secret things in there and all that stuff. And so they did. Now, I'm not a construction person. I had to look some of this stuff up, and I figured out the piece of wood. It was one piece of wood that would become the bridge that would bridge the two trees together, and it was a 2 by 12. And so it was about 10, 12 feet apart. And so you took this 2 by 12. Basically, here's what I learned. For those of you that are dumb like me, it's like a 2 by 4, which is a piece of wood that you use inside your walls. Imagine that instead of being 4 inches, 12 inches at wide. That's all I know. That's about the extent of my knowledge. They took this piece of wood, they nailed it to one tree, they took the other side and nailed it to the other tree. Now just think with me for a second. A piece of wood, 4 inches wide, 2 inches thick. So when you'd walk across it, that was the entire bridge, by the way. OSHA would not have approved, just so y'all know. The thing would slope, in the middle as you walked across. And so they put up 2 ropes to hold on to when you walk across. And not that, I don't know what you're going to hold on to. If you're down, you're down. And then they had this bright idea because that thing would slope. I'm not making this up. I wish I was making this up. It's so stupid. They said what we need to do, because it slopes so much, we need to take a 2 by 4 and we need to nail it underneath the wood like this so that it would create support. The 2 by 4 wouldn't reach the ground. They nailed it up there. It's like 3 or 4 foot off the ground. So when it would slope, but you'd hope that it would hit the ground and maybe you wouldn't fall. These dudes, when they built this thing, they built this fancy little treehouse on the other side. They would walk across it, dance across it. They were crazy. I thought, in my brain as like a 6 or 7-year-old, it's like that thing is like 40 feet up there. Now, it was probably just 10, but in my head, you fall off that, you're dead. I'm not going to survive it. I'm like, there's no way I'm going across that thing. And so they would go over. It seemed like they were having a great time. I mean, a good time. So I was like, I think I need to get over that bridge. I got to go see what the party is over there. So I would climb up, get up there, and get on the edge, right on that piece of wood. And I couldn't do it. Everything inside of me was saying, you are not going across that thing. I'm like, no, I got to go across. There's a good time going on the other side. I could not make myself do it. Day after day, I was watching them do that, and I couldn't do it. And finally, one day, in my head, what I said was, I have got to not focus on the ground, and I got to find a different way than just walking. So I'm not making this up. I'm telling you the absolute truth. I laid flat on my stomach, and I closed my eyes, and I literally just inchwormed that bad boy 15 minutes, because I got in the middle and I was like, I'm stuck. I quit. I do not want to do this. But here's the thing. If I go back, it's the same distance as if I go forward. So I'm like, I am in trouble here. 15 minutes I worked my way across the other side and finally get to the other side. And I was in heaven. I was having a great time. Now, it wasn't as impressive as I thought it would be. It was actually a crappy little treehouse. But in my mind, it was the greatest thing I'd ever seen. But then I had a problem. You want to take a guess what the problem was? How am I going to get back over? I was up there for hours. And my brother and my cousin realized he ain't coming down. I mean, we're in trouble. And Papa was going to kill us. And so they had to go tell Papa that I was stuck up in a tree. He has to bring a ladder up there to get me down because he's telling me, just get on back over that wood. Just get on back over it. I'm like, I'm not going back over that wood. I'm right here. You better bring me some dinner is what you need to bring me up here. So he put the ladder up, I get down. Now, here's the thing I want to get. Here's what you want to think about. Many of us get in a situation where we really are in a situation where we're just stuck. Like there's a wall. We want to overcome it, but no matter how hard we try, we can't find that traction to make the steps that are necessary to get over this hurdle that's in front of us, whatever it is. And something has to be the initiator, the spark that moves us and gets it. I'll tell you, for me, and many of you have felt this way, there have been times I've been stuck in my life where I actually thought I was going backwards more than I was going forward. I mean, the inertia usually keeps you stable, but sometimes my inertia was so bad, I was going in reverse. And I don't know if you've experienced that, but something has to push you over it. Now, the reason I bring this up is, I mean, this is like the perfect situation for Joseph. I mean, here's a dude. Let's just remember his whole crazy story. At the very beginning, God gives him this crazy dream. And again, he's a young guy. He was stupid. He was bragging about all this stuff. But God was pointing to something that was going to happen in his life. And so in his head, he's going, God, you've got a purpose for me. And so he thought he was important. You know, I'm relevant. And he kind of boasted about it, and it didn't go well for him. His brothers, if you remember, throw him into a pit. Then they say, "Hi, we can make money off this guy. Let's pull him out of the pit. Let's sell him into slavery." He gets sold into slavery, and the slavery gets sold again. He ends up in Potiphar's house in Egypt. Now, in Potiphar's house, finally gets there, realizes his circumstance, and again, like here he is. He's like, "Okay, this is my lot in life. Here's where I'm at. I'm going to flourish." And so he flourishes. He does well. He's succeeding, and then all of a sudden, he was a hottie apparently. The Potiphar's wife thought he was very attractive, and she pursues him. And in that pursuit, he rejects, does the right thing, and he pays the price and ends up in prison, which is where we are today. And again, time after time, he gets stuck in the pit, stuck in slavery, and now he's stuck in a prison. And I think if we're in this room and we're all being honest, can we just say, if I'm in a situation like that, and granted, that's crazy, right? Your circumstance may not be that crazy, but if you feel like time and time again, no matter what it is, you keep finding yourself stuck in some circumstance, in some relationship, or some work issue, no matter what it is, I'm stuck, I think it's fair to say that there's going to be certain emotions that you would have, and it makes sense. I mean, emotions like, think about it, anger. I mean, that's not outrageous thing about being angry. Some of this stuff's not his fault. God, you told me I had this thing, and here I am. He's frustrated. Maybe he's bitter. He has this negativity that's brewing inside of him. Let's be honest. At some point, year after year of all this stuff, you would think that maybe you'll even get jaded and become a little cynical and turn all of a sudden be the person who's kind of making the environment a bad environment, whining and crying and kind of throwing yourself a pity party. But here's what I want you to get. I just want you to think about it. Again, remember, we're believers. And as believers, we got to think a little bit different for those of us who follow Christ in our circumstances. And for him, God has this bigger call in his life. Here's what I want you to get. What most of us want in life is the path of least resistance. So everything that we're doing, we're trying to think about, I want the path of least resistance. However, I found that what God wants is for us to have the path of most significance. He's not, God, and this is just why I'm saying it, God is not always about our circumstances. Because here's the reality. You can't control your circumstance, can you? I mean, your circumstance often, well, you can maybe somewhat, but in a lot of cases, you kind of get stuck in these circumstances that you can't control. And when you can't control it, there is one thing that you can control, and that's how you respond to your circumstance. You do have some control in a situation. Like, I'm in a situation, I feel stuck. How am I going to respond? Because here's the thing. When the tendency kicks, and listen, I'm not faulting him for being angry, frustrated. Listen, it makes sense. I'm not faulting you if that's your default, because that makes sense when it happens. But at some point in time, if you allow that to continue, your head will begin to turn down, and you'll begin to gaze upon your circumstance so much that you'll get stuck in your circumstance and miss your opportunity that's in front of you to get out of your circumstance or to use your circumstance for something far more significant. So you control your response. I'm not going to allow myself to turn downward. I don't know what his gift was, but Joseph seemed to have an incredible gift that no matter the circumstance, he stayed focused. So today, here's what I want us to do. I want us to look at, how do I gain traction when I feel like I'm stuck? Whenever I get stuck, there's got to be a way. How do I gain some traction in that circumstance? We're looking at Genesis chapter 39 to start off, and these few verses in 21 to 23 that kind of point out something very interesting. So let's take a look. Genesis 39, verse 21 says this. But the Lord was with Joseph. But the Lord was with Joseph. I'm thinking, if I'm Joseph, and this time, because remember, he's now in prison. The Lord was, if I was Joseph, I'd be going, hey, God, appreciate it, but can you be with somebody else for a little bit? You are wearing me out. The jailer, he looks like a perfect person right now that you can go hang out with. I'm tired. But it's what it says. The Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love, gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. The keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge, because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed. So the Lord, in verse 21, the Lord was with Joseph. So let's think about this. It says that God, kind of is with him and he shows them this kindness. And that's kind of hard in my head sometimes. I don't know if you're struggling with it. It seems like, God, if you're for me, why would you put me in this circumstance? Why would you not just get me out of the circumstance? And again, God's not always interested or more concerned about your circumstance. And I understand in our prosperity-driven type culture and the Western culture, this mindset of the way we live, we think that our circumstance is everything and it's not fair and that we've been treated. We always think that way. We rarely think about what God thinks about, which is, how are you going to respond in any circumstance? Since you can't control all the circumstances, how are you going to? Because let's just be honest. Would you be honest for a second? There are going to be times that you feel like you're in slavery, when you feel like you're in a pit. There are going to be times when you feel like that you're in a prison. That's a guarantee. That's for sure. Life, that is life. That is part of life. The question is God going to be with you in that circumstance when it shows up? I mean, that's what really matters. God, are you going to be with me? Because listen, let me just say this. Let me ask you this. Just straight up ask you this question. Would you rather be at home without God, or would you rather be in prison with God? Because that's going to reveal a lot about how you're going to respond in your circumstance. Would you rather be at home without God or in prison with God? And I know it's a tough question. I'm just saying mindset and attitude and predetermination oftentimes set into motion how a circumstance and how success and opportunities are going to be bred in a circumstance that feels very difficult. So again, let's answer this question. I'm going to give you two things. How do you gain traction when you feel stuck? Two things that Joseph does I think is pretty important that I want to give you today that I think is going to help us. To help us do that, let me just explain traction. Let's think about traction. So the concept of traction is this. It refers to when you get grip or forward movement. And so you're addressing an obstacle that is preventing forward movement. Something happens and you gain forward movement. Much like on the bridge, there was forward movement because there was some predetermination for me to take a step and to pull forward to overcome this obstacle, fear, and to make progress across it. I'm not going to look at the ground. I'm going to inch across. But let's think about a car. If a car gets stuck, right, and you're in the mud and you're turning up mud and you can't get any traction, what do you start doing? You think about a couple of things. One, is there anything around me like wood, or is there gravel or something that I could put underneath the tire that would allow the tire to grab something, gain some traction, and move forward? Now, back in the sticks, the way we would do it was we would look around and find the 3 or 4 biggest people we could find, and we would get them and we'd place them on the wheel cells, right, and push that thing down into the ground and find some dirt or something to gain traction and to move forward. And so that's what I want us to think about. What are a couple of things that we can do to put in place whenever all of a sudden there is some situation that you feel like you're in some type of prison, you feel stuck? What are something that you're going to put into place that allow you to gain some traction? Now listen to me. This is important. A lot of times when you feel stuck, you're trying to think so far ahead of how you're going to get out of that circumstance when sometimes you need to slow down and just think about, how do I get even just a small amount of movement? Listen to me. Here's what I've learned. A little bit of movement creates momentum. What a lot of us need right now is not thinking about how do I go 100 miles an hour. We need to think about how can I move half a mile an hour. And with that, I can build on that and create some momentum. So let me give you the first one. If you want to get movement, if you want to get this thing started and moving forward, traction always starts with trust. Answering that big question, who do you trust? The first step in the prison was to find yourself in a situation where, who is it that I trust? Now I want you to think about this, because here's one of the big mistakes. Anytime we're looking at Old Testament, we tend to do this a lot of times in churches, and pastors move from gospel-centered preaching, life transformation type preaching, to make you feel good type preaching. So in other words, it's like, hey, your best life, and let me tell you these things. We get wrapped up when we look at Joseph's story. We're thinking about, okay, give us a couple of things that we need to do in our life so that when things are difficult, we can get some traction in our life, and my life will be better. Throughout this whole thing, for the rest of the time, what you're going to end up seeing is Joseph is not the big picture here. Joseph gets to be a part of the big picture. And the first step in getting traction in your life that is meaningful, listen to me, that is meaningful and purposeful and that has eternal significance is, who do you trust? Who do you ultimately trust? Who has transformed your life? Because that person is the one who has the power and the ability to do something significant in you. The mistake that you'll make when you get into your circumstance in life, the mistake that a lot of us are going to make is going to make this about me just being a better person, me just having some little overcoming experience. No, the person who could transform you, his name is Jesus. And if you trust him, place your faith in him, he has something in store for you. Joseph didn't need to forget. He needed to remember in that moment in his prison that God gave him a dream and God was going to fulfill it. I don't know when, I don't know how, or what's going to come of it, but I trust God and I'm going to do it. So what do I do? Listen to me. So Psalms chapter 109, 119, 105 says this. Listen, your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. Your word. So just like I told you a little bit, you just need a little bit of inertia. So I know that God, your word, when you speak to me and when you're teaching me, and my trust in you is if I will just trust you and take the little steps. What I've learned over and over again in life, God rarely shows you a path, the whole entire path of how you're going to get. He might show you where you're going, but how I'm going to get there is not always clear. You know what he'll do? He'll give you just a little bit. What's right in front of you? What is the next step you need to take? And the question is, am I going to trust God to take that step in this one little thing to get a little bit of momentum going? How much light? Just enough light to take the next step. You don't have to trust God for the whole future yet when you feel like you're in prison or you're stuck. You just have to trust him with the next step, that one thing that God wants you to do. Now, why is this important? Listen to me. If you can get this trust down, if I can really get to the point that I trust God with everything, think about this statement right here, this question. What would you do in your life if you were absolutely confident, with greatest confidence that God was with you? Imagine every scenario that you would be in. If you were absolutely confident, God, you are with me, how would you respond? How would you act? What would you do? Where would you go? What would you say? How would you behave? Because that's what the first step is. God, do I trust you with everything? Because if I can predetermine that, then when I'm in the circumstances that feel like I'm stuck or in a prison or in slavery or my world's falling apart, I can go back to, well, who's the one that I trust? And do I really trust him? If I do, I'm going to take the steps and trust him even when it doesn't make sense. So traction starts with trust. But there's one more thing I want you to see when we look at chapter 40. So chapter 40 says this, verses 1 through 8. Sometime after this, the cupbearer of the king of Egypt and his baker committed an offense against the Lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was angry with the two officers, the cupbearer and the chief baker, and he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard in prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard appointed Joseph to be with them, and he attended them, and they continued for some time in custody. Check this out. And one night, they both dreamed, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were confined in prison, each his own dream, and each dream with its own interpretation. When Joseph came to them in the morning, he saw that they were troubled. So he asked Pharaoh's officers who were with him in custody in the master's house, "Why are your faces downcast today?" And they said to him, "We had dreams, and there was no one to interpret them." And Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." All right, I want you to think about this because it's crazy. Verse 7 says this. It says, so he asked Pharaoh's officers who were with him in custody in the master's house, "Why are your faces downcast today?" Now listen, after everything that he's been through and where he's at, if anybody has a right to be downcast, it's Joseph. If anybody had a reason to keep their head down, it's him. But listen, how do you gain traction when you feel like you're stuck? It's one, trust. You know, we got that. Traction always begins with trust. But two, the other thing is keep your head up. You have to lift your head up, keep your head up. Now, that's a weird phrase. We always say keep your head up. So in a basketball game, you lose the game, or you make a bad shot. In football, you miss the big pass, and the game doesn't go your way, where the coach says, keep your head up. Come on, man, keep your head up. It's okay, right? We hear this phrase a lot, keep your head up. And that's true. That's one way. But the other way is literally keep your head up. Not just metaphorically, keep your head up. Look around at the circumstances. In other words, when you feel like you're stuck, the only way to get out of stuck is I got to look around, where's the wood? Where are the people? What am I going to stick under the wheels? How am I going to get traction in this situation? You got to keep your head up looking for the opportunities. And in this case, because he wasn't downcast, he saw that these guys were downcast, and he steps into their situation, and he begins to speak to it. Why are you downcast? He speaks to them. Now, they begin to tell him about a dream. We've had these dreams, and I'm thinking if I'm Joseph, this is Chris, and I'm going to be honest with you, I've been going, dude, you want to talk about dreams? Let me tell you about some dreams. Dreams I had years ago didn't work out well for me because now I'm in prison. Whine about your circumstance. It is easy for you to do that, but he didn't do that. In verse 8, the second part of verse 8, Joseph said to them this. When he heard that they had dreams, he goes this. Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams. See, you know what happens when you allow your circumstance to turn you downcast? You miss what God has for you, and most often what is right in front of you. So you got to keep your head up. So if I could boil everything down to this, here's what I want you to get. Ready for this? Every shattered dream is an opportunity for a divine appointment. Every time you think everything, your dreams and all your plans, they seem shattered, hold on. God might be up to something. Think about this with me. Keep your head up. If you keep your head up, guess what happens? All of a sudden, God puts opportunities in front of you that are traction opportunities for you to make a difference in somebody else's life. Keep your head up. If you keep looking for the opportunities, God's going to put some divine appointment right in front of you that's going to lift you out of your circumstance. The problem is you don't keep your head up. What happens is you miss your divine appointment. You miss your opportunities that God has right in front of you to be a part of something bigger than yourself. Now, this is crazy. Listen to me. I don't know if you've ever heard this phrase, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. You heard that? Listen, I hope you'll get this today because it'll change your life. Let me ask you this. What if 2 steps back could be the very thing that's going to push God's name forward? What if you see something that's pulling you back is actually God positioning you in the right place at the right time that you're going to propel His name forward? Because remember what I told you earlier, saying about you. God is saying, hey, I'm inviting you into something that is bigger than you. Do you want to be a part of it? 2 steps back. Now, let me show you how this happens in his life. Because he took the 2 steps back. He's in this bad situation. He's in prison. Everything seems to be bad. He is keeping his head up. He's trusting God for these circumstances. And all of a sudden, he gets to start seeing, after a period of time, God begin to work. Genesis chapter 49 through 22. He interprets their dreams for them. And he gets to be a part of those dreams coming true and seeing them come to fruition. He plays a part in their story. Genesis chapter 40, 14 through 15. Joseph then asked the cupbearer, once his vision comes true and he's now going to go back into the house, hey, remember me when you're back up there. Genesis chapter 40, 23 all the way to 41, verse 1. Joseph gets forgotten for 2 years. He spends another 2 years in prison. Genesis chapter 41, 1 through 14. Pharaoh has a dream and a cupbearer remembers Joseph. He says, hey, I remember a guy a couple of years ago that interpreted my dreams. You need to meet this guy. Genesis chapter 41, 15 to 32. Joseph then comes before Pharaoh. He hears Pharaoh's dreams and he begins to interpret them. The dream warns of a famine that is to follow in a season of plenty. Joseph in chapter 41, 33 through 36, Joseph proposes a plan for Pharaoh and for the country, how they can take 7 years to prepare for the famine, and then they're going to prosper and survive during the famine. And here's what I want you to get. Remember what I said. What if God is setting you up for some way that you propel His name forward? 41, 37 through 40. The proposal pleased Pharaoh and all of his servants. And Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find a man like this? In whom what? Come on, you can say it out loud. In whom is the what? The Spirit of God. This is Pharaoh. He is God in their mindset. He puts himself out there as I'm the guy. And in this moment, he realizes, oh, I'm not the guy. I don't know who this guy is. There's something different about him. And God is with him. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has shown you all of this, there is none so discerning and wise as you are. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall order themselves as you command. Only as regards to the throne will I be greater than you. See, listen, Joseph was in a situation where he was able to help them out. And the result is that God's people were going to survive as a result of it. He got to be a part of something bigger than himself. This was never about Joseph. This was making God's name great. Listen, what we need to do today is this. Focus on finding your divine appointments and stop counting all of the sorrows. Stop putting your head down. Lift it up. God has a plan for you. Listen, like in that second part of verse 8, the second part, as this whole thing is, he becomes a mediator between these people, between God and the cupbearer and them. He sees himself, okay, God, you placed me in a circumstance to be a mediator, and that's what God's wanting for us in all of our circumstances, the changing of our thinking. And so you could just imagine, what if Joseph didn't do this? He'd have missed all of these opportunities. So today, here's what I want to do. I want to invite you to step into this moment. I want to invite you to start thinking about your circumstance. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask we got some folks that I'm going to ask to come forward who are going to be at the front, who are going to pray for us at the end. And so at the end, we're just going to have this time when the band's going to come out, if they'll come on out, and they're going to play and they're going to sing over you. And I just want you to sit in this moment. And I want you to think about a few things that I want to pose to you, and begin to answer some of these questions that I want to pose to you as the band sings over you. And as these folks are going to be up here praying for you, here's some things I want you to think about. First thing is this. What prison or where in your life do you feel stuck? When you think about your life, whether you're currently in a prison or whether you currently feel stuck, or maybe for you it's been in the past, okay? Whatever it is, I want you to think about a scenario where you feel stuck. And let me give you a few examples of what stuck looks like. Do you feel stuck in your calling? So in other words, maybe for you, you've been trying to figure out what your purpose in life is. God, why did you create me? In other words, pretty much like Joseph, what is the big thing for me? And maybe you've been stuck in that, whether you're in high school or you're maybe in college, and you're trying to say, okay, what am I supposed to do with my life? Where in the world am I going? Or maybe for you, you're just coming to faith in Christ and you're like, man, I'm clueless. I don't know where to go. I'm just stuck. I feel like I'm spinning my wheels. I don't know where I'm going or what I'm going to do. That's a great place to begin to say, okay, God, I trust you, and start keeping my head up and looking for those opportunities. Maybe it's a relationship, maybe with your parents, or maybe parents with your kids, or maybe it's a marital relationship or a friendship relationship that is just kind of stuck, not going anywhere. Maybe it's toxic and there's some issues that are in that situation that you need to deal with, but you're just stuck. Maybe it's an illness or a diagnosis that's been given, and you're trying to figure out, and you just feel stuck. God, why would you put me in this situation? I feel like you have this plan, this purpose, but I can't see how I'm going to get out of it. Or maybe you've just wrecked your finances, or you can't even figure out your finances or what you're supposed to. Hey, here's a crazy thought. Maybe for you, you got finances. You got the ability to do things, and you're trying to figure out, okay, God, what do you want me to do? Wherever you feel stuck, the question is this: how are you going to respond in that circumstance? That's what matters. So what has your tendency been? What is your trust and your tendency to trust been? And what is it going to be going forward? What step do you need to take to trust God in your circumstance? And do you believe that God is going to show up in that moment? So I want to pray over you. Listen, you may never know what God is doing until He's already done it, right? You won't know the reason a lot of times that you're in prison if you quit. So at some point, you got to stay forward, embrace what God's doing, and see what God has for you. Can I pray for you? Let's pray together. Father, my prayer is this in this room, and I know just based on my own life, there are some of us in here who feel stuck. And I've listed a few examples, but God, I know that there are so many things that are happening in people's lives. And my prayer is this: may we just stop right now and take a deep breath. May we begin to evaluate what our tendency is. And maybe in this room today, God, there are some of us who say that we trust you. We do the church game. We go through the motions. We like the idea of you, but we are not trusting you. We've certainly not trusted you with our lives. And maybe today that's where it begins. This fresh trust of you for the first time, maybe. And some of us got in here today, maybe our tendency is not to trust you in those circumstances. We fall back to our default. And maybe today, God, we just need to commit ourselves to that. And God, some of us, we need to pick our heads up. For some of us, we've just been stuck going through the motions over and over again, downcast. And God, I know for myself, finding myself a couple of times in just a deep state of depression, just ruminating and playing the tapes over and over again. God, my prayer is this: would you break the bondage that has trapped so many of us? God, help us to lift our head up and not worry about the full picture, but God, help us to take that one small step, that movement. And God, my prayer is this: would you create momentum and your name be made great? God, we commit this time to you in the name of Christ. Amen.